So yeah, obviously a lot happened this week. The entire
Yeah,
West Coast is on fire.
it's gray. It's been
Yep.
gray for days.
Um, Football came back, and
Thank
there
God.
was some controversy about already controversy about player protests and all that. Did you see?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So I actually have something to say about that because I agree that if people were booing the players, right,
Mm-hmm.
that's bad. That's bad.
Yeah.
Okay, that's bad. But from what I've heard from people who actually know people who were at the game, who went to the game, and so on, that maybe is not actually what happened. And my understanding is that they were actually not aware that that was what was happening in that moment. From what I was told from someone who was my English teacher back in high school, she's a diehard Kansas City Chiefs fan. And also, actually, she happens to be on the left side of the spectrum. She came out on her Facebook and she posted something where she said, "Hey, look, if they were booing these people, I would be right there with you to say it. But I want to make this clear, in defense of my fellow Kansas City Chiefs fans, that my understanding from the people who were there was that they didn't even know that the moment of silence had started. They didn't even know anything was happening. They couldn't hear. And then they were just like, thank you for the moment of silence. And everyone's looking at each other like, wait a minute, what? We were just booing the Texans. Like, we didn't know, because people were still lining up
Mm-hmm.
when the moment of silence started. So my understanding is, I think is a bit of a reactionary response because, I've been to a lot of football games. I'm sure you've been to a lot of football games. It can get really loud, and sometimes you don't know what the hell is going on.
Yep.
And so I think it would be, I would be really surprised if tens of thousands of people all piled into a stadium and booed players while they were having a moment of silence. It just seems uncharacteristic, even for the way that Americans are right now.
Yeah, I think I agree. It probably was a lot more chaotic in the stadium. On top of that, people haven't gone to sports games in how long now? So
Ugh,
I
don't remind
think
me, man.
the problem I think comes from the optics of it being shown on TV, and how
Exactly.
it's translated. And then on top of that, I mean, the NFL has had its own share of controversy over the last few years
Sure.
regarding stuff like this.
Sure.
Um,
Absolutely. And
and I
deserved. Well deserved controversy.
Yes. And I think it goes into a bigger conversation about just patriotism overall and
Right.
how we view patriotism and who gets to be a patriot. And does
Hmm.
patriotism belong to a certain group, or
Sure.
are we all patriots? How do we define it? Um,
I think that's kind of our general topic that we're going to be going over today is we're going to try to relate things back to the idea of patriotism, what that means. We're going to talk about nationalism and kind of the growing strain of nationalism in the country, what that means, and the differences between what we see as patriotism, what we see as nationalism. A little background about me personally: I've lived in several countries growing up. I've seen different forms of patriotism, different forms of nationalism, and I think that gives me a pretty good perspective to kind of have this discussion and really chat about those differences, and in regards to what I've seen personally, in regards to what I've read, and of course, Malcolm's point of view as well, and his experience. We just think it's really important to kind of talk about those things right now, because we think we're seeing a lot of people kind of say, hey, if you do this, you're not American. If you do this, you're unpatriotic, or what have you. And we want to bring in sort of a perspective of, okay, dictionary definition, this is what patriotism is. Dictionary definition, this is what nationalism is. And then just kind of relate that to our own experiences and our own opinions and thoughts on that topic. So if you want to start us off, Malcolm.
well, before I do, on top of that, I want to just say that, these are a lot of what we're going to be talking about is just our own opinions, and both of us are going to try to be as neutral as possible when it comes to how we're stating whatever facts we are.
Yeah, but neutral to facts,
Neutral to
mind you.
facts. Yeah.
We're not going to be neutral to political opinions because we don't, pardon my French, but we don't give a shit what your opinions are. The only thing we care about are facts and how we look at those facts, right? If it comes to a point where we're interpreting facts to have an opinion, well, then we're going to be talking about it as opinion. But the goal of this is to be as factual as possible because we don't want to leave room for interpretation. We want to try to nail in on, nail down problems, nail down solutions, and have them actually be viable ones based on, evidence that's available to us to really actually give us actionable recourse or just ways to deal with these different issues that we're all kind of facing right now.
Definitely. And I think a good reason why we kind of want to do this on video and on audio is because a lot tends to get lost in just text and people arguing and reading each other's Facebook comments or YouTube comments.
Nobody ever, you're never going to convince a Facebook warrior on Facebook.
Totally.
You have to have those full conversations. You have to flesh things out and really dive into the nitty gritty. And it's not just going to be the two of us either. We're going to be bringing people on of all different kinds of views. We'll have panels. We'll have Trump supporters. We'll have Democrats. We'll have progressives. We'll have classical conservatives. Anti-Trump Republicans. We want to run the whole gamut, hear all the the opinions, and really have those discussions, right? Bring up the facts that we discuss and ask real questions, and most importantly, not let people get away with talking points, because we don't like talking points here. Talking points are bad. Talking points are excuses to get away from hard questions, and that's not what we want to do.
Totally. So yeah, let's like we were saying, we want to talk a little bit about patriotism today, and I think that NFL situation was a good kind of jumping off point.
Sure.
In my opinion, a lot of the things that we consider patriotic are really just kind of superficial things. Putting a flag on the back of your pickup truck, wearing,
Sure.
Wearing the flag, even things. And I want to preface this by saying I think the national anthem is great, and I think that it should be played at certain events. I don't see the necessity.
I could take it or leave it, honestly.
I don't see the necessity of it being played at every single game. And like, what I want to know, and maybe you know a little bit more about this than I do,
Sure.
is when did sports become so hyper patriotized and hyper nationalist? Because we're two American teams that are playing each other.
Sure.
Do we have to announce that we're American teams to each other in order to start the game off?
Right. Like, this isn't the Olympics, man. Like, we know what country we're in right now.
Yeah.
You could almost say it's. I love going back to George Carlin when we talk about this sort of thing, because I think he nailed it down so well, right? He was like, it's symbols, it's symbols for the symbol-minded, right? It's giving people something to latch onto that they can be like, okay, this is me showing my support for my country. But the only thing it really is a feeling, right? It's just something that makes you feel a certain way. Okay, we wrote a song, it's about our country, and that's great, right? We can show pride in our country by singing that song. But I don't understand the point where it goes to like this sacrosanct thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just a song, dude. Like, it's a song. The more patriotic thing to me is doing those things you can to make this country better. That's patriotic to me, if you ask me. So when people talk about the song and the national anthem and things like that, I'm like, look, yeah, I get that the song is a representation of the feelings we have about people who sacrifice their lives for our country, and I appreciate that, right? I'm not saying that I don't. What I am saying is that I think people have made it into more than what it is, right? People don't freak out if somebody sits down during Amazing Grace. People don't freak out if they sit down, during like that country 9/11 song from like 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the same concept, but for some reason they're able to separate it there, and they don't really care as much. But for this particular one, this song, it's attached to our country as the national anthem, and so everybody gets really freaked out about it. I'm not trying to say that the national anthem isn't something that's important to our country. In a sense it is, right? But we don't need to plaster it all the time everywhere. We know where we are, right? We
Yeah,
know we're in America.
and I would add on to that by saying, it makes sense if like the Dodgers are playing the Blue Jays because it's two different
Sure,
countries' teams, or we're
they should
playing it at
also
the
play Canada's
Olympics.
national anthem too.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Like that's going to show like, hey, this team represents this country, this team represents this country. We're coming
totally.
together, common goal to enjoy the sport. But
You go to other countries, soccer games, they don't do that.
yeah,
Like it's not, unless it's like the World Cup, which is different,
exactly.
or the
Yeah.
Olympics,
Hmm.
which is different. So, yeah, I just personally, I get that it's kind of like become a tradition, right? But chill the fuck out, people. I mean, there are way more important things for us to be dealing with than that. I know a lot of soldiers, man. I know a lot of Marines. I know a lot of people in the armed forces. I grew up around a lot of them. And they care a lot more about individual people and their well-being than a song. I can promise you that.
Well, on top of that, a lot of people are saying, if you kneel during the anthem, you're disrespecting the troops.
It's
First of
not true.
all, the people that are kneeling, it has nothing to do with the troops. But on top of that, okay, we can think about the troops. These people do risk their lives for us every single day. Um, but at the same time, we treat veterans like shit in this country. Like how many veterans
Yeah.
have homeless in camps? They can't get they can't get health care. They
Well, when
can't
it comes to our soldiers, we're all talk, man. We're all talk. Support our troops. Support our people. Respect our soldiers. But as soon as they come home and want health care, oh, I shouldn't be paying for your health care. Dude, like how callous can we be? We're cool
Mhm.
with them going to die, but we don't want to help them live? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think that goes into why I think a lot of the ways that we show our patriotism has become so superficial.
I
Um,
agree.
and this goes back to a conversation that we were having kind of last week. Is
Mhm.
it's not just troops that are risking their lives for this country. There are a lot of people that
Especially
aren't
right now.
necessarily going to war that are serving their country and putting their lives in danger. And that's, diplomats,
Yeah,
ambassadors.
like my mom.
There's a ton of,
My
there's a,
dad used to.
mm-hmm.
I did,
And
even. I mean, I was just a kid. I was along for the ride, but like my life was on the line. My parents' lives were on the line. I've had to be evacuated from a country while it was going through a violent and bloody coup. So, like I've been there, and I've seen how other federal employees, serve this country. And I think everybody just focuses on the soldiers, and there's so much more. There's so many more people who take their entire lives and they literally just spend it serving you, right? They're here for you, and they never get any recognition. In fact, they often just get shit on, right?
mm-hmm.
Like people talk shit about the federal government all the time, and I'm sitting here like, dude, no, you need to direct your anger to the right people. You need to direct your anger to the corrupt politicians, the corrupt businessmen who are funding the lobbyists who corrupt the politicians. You don't have a problem with career federal employees. How could you, dude? How could you have a problem with career federal employees? These are people who've been working there their whole lives. They're doing their jobs. They're doing their jobs to the best of their ability. They don't make these decisions. They do what's in the best interest for the country. And I am getting real tired of people talking shit about the federal government when I personally know many, many people in the federal government who worked in the federal government their whole lives and are more dedicated to this country than all of these people on the internet being Facebook warriors. So I'm getting real tired of that, man.
And on top of that, aside from people that even work in government, I mean, we've been in this pandemic situation for
Sure.
a number of months now.
Absolutely.
And as much as a lot of things have opened up and stuff, when this first started and we were locked down, people did not know if they delivered food for you, if they were going to get sick and end up in a hospital. They didn't know.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, none of us knew. So
that's why I gave them really nice tips.
Exactly. And that to me is also patriotic.
Patriotism.
People that are, delivering our groceries, people that are working in grocery stores,
supporting the country and putting themselves on the line.
Yeah. Oh, I think I lost you.
Sorry about that.
That's all good.
Hang on one moment. You go ahead, keep talking.
Yeah, but that's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of sports and in terms of how I think that's at the forefront right now of how it's kind of a litmus test is how do you think about the protests that are going on, or even like in the NBA, the social justice messages that are on the back of player uniforms. There's Black Lives Matter painted on the courts. It's what do you think about that? And if you're really so opposed to it that you're going to stop watching sports, or you're going to say, I've watched the Lakers for 30 years, and because Alex Caruso has Black Lives Matter on the back of his jersey, I'm going to stop watching it.
Yeah, I mean, like this whole idea that nobody other's political opinions are okay except for your own, and you're going to say screw you to everybody who even supports an opposing political opinion is just another example of how divided we've become in this country. And I think it's really sad because I have a lot of friends who are on the right. I have some of them who are not so Trump supporters, and I love them, and they know I love them, and I tell them all the time. But, I also call them nutsos from my opinion when it comes to that. And it's okay because we're still friends, because they understand that A, I'm just giving them a hard time, and B, there are things more to personal relationships than differences in political opinions. Now, I know a lot of people have differing opinions and perspectives on that, and that's okay. Like, I respect that. If you feel like you need to get rid of people in your life who are making you feel sad or they're toxic, like, I understand that, right? I'm not arguing against that, but I think we've kind of let it get to that point, and we could have avoided that.
And that also kind of takes me to cancel culture in a way. And I think that a lot of people are saying one side or the other is like the source of cancel culture. And
I'm saying it's both, dude.
It totally is. I think that, we're so, and this has been for a long time now. Like, it didn't start with Trump. It started long before this. Like, we're so quick to dismiss people now because of a certain opinion without hearing them out.
Sure.
And I mean, at least in my life, I've tried to stick with a lot of people that have differing opinions than me. It really has to get to a point where it's like, I think that they've gone so far to one direction that it's like against my own morals to continue a relationship with this person.
That's fair.
But for the most part,
go ahead. Sorry.
For the most part, I don't think that that's happened for most people. I think a lot of us
hasn't for me.
It hasn't for me, and it hasn't for a lot of my friends on both sides. So I think it sucks because I wish that we would listen to each other more.
I agree, and actually listen to each other, right? Because a lot of times we just we listen with the purpose of just being like, okay, this is what I believe, you're going to deal with it. Like, accept what I believe, I'm just going to come at you instead of saying like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but this is why I think you're wrong, right? It's just, no, screw you, I don't want to talk to you, or you're a sheep. Which, by the way, folks out there, the minute you use the word sheep, I don't care what side you're on, you lose all your credibility with me. We need to stop using that kind of language. We need to stop dismissing each other, because there's two reasons. When you use the word sheep, number one, you are absolutely telegraphing to everybody that you are not open to hearing any sort of argument, because you've just told everyone that you already believe that everyone else is brainwashed and you're the only one who knows what he's talking about, and you are not going to go anywhere in any sort of conversation from that point of view. And number two, it's really low brow, low intelligence kind of thing to say, right? Like, call everybody else, oh, you're just a brainwashed sheep, as a response to whatever their thing is. Doesn't matter what it is. They say something stupid, if they say something smart, when you just call them a sheep, you've just shown that you really don't have anything else to back it up. You just want to call them whatever you want. Just stop that. It's stupid. It doesn't look good. It doesn't make you look good. You probably think you look good, but you don't. It's dumb. Sorry. That was a tangent I needed to go off on.
I agree with you there. And I also, what's scary to me though is there is a lot of misinformation out there and fake news.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there.
And then you get the feedback loop, right? You get the feedback loop of Facebook and Twitter taking something down, and instead of them going, oh, well, I guess it's fake news, they go, oh, no, it's part of the conspiracy. And you're like, dude, no, like, seriously? Like, that's not what's happening.
But I think also Facebook and YouTube, to an extent, are responsible for a lot of this, because
in a sense,
the way that their algorithms work, a lot of times are generous to the type of conspiracy news and memes that get shared around.
Yeah, but is that, I don't, I'd be very skeptical to go and say something like, yeah, this is all Facebook's fault, because I don't think, I'm going to be honest, and I think this is probably an unpopular opinion for most people, but I think Facebook tried to be as open to free speech as possible and be as fair to everybody as possible. The problem was people were taking advantage of those algorithms and using them, right, to spread that stuff. And when it did come to things that were bad, really bad misinformation that were starting to cause problems, they didn't act. And while it is sort of encroaching on what people may consider free speech, we have to remember that your speech ends where other people's danger begins, right? If you're giving out speech that puts other people in danger, that is not protected speech under the Constitution, friends. That is not protected speech, and it is a misinterpretation of the Constitution to say that it is.
Well, I think you're probably right in terms of Facebook wanting to be as open to free speech as possible, and I'll go ahead and give them the benefit of the doubt and give Google the benefit of the doubt that they want to be as open to free speech as possible. But at the same time, they are platforms that do control a lot of speech. So there's a lot of things that get banned from Facebook. There's a lot of posts that get reported. There's a lot of posts that immediately get removed on any of their platforms.
Yeah, so, like they'll cover up a gory beheading with a little, this is for adults, but God forbid a nipple shows up.
Exactly. Well, I'll just go ahead and say an anecdote. So my wife has, for a number of years, done pole dancing. She's won some competitions from it. She has a lot
Oh,
of
cool.
friends that are into it.
I didn't know there were competitions.
There are, and it has become like a pretty big sport, and they have their own community, and they've even like tried to get into the Olympics, and they're in the process of getting.
This is news
Yeah.
to me. I'm gonna have to get into this sport, man.
It's like it has a lot of like gymnastics and athleticism.
Excuse me, I'm gonna
There's
kill
men
myself
that do
for
it
a
in the
couple minutes
sport.
here, guys.
But okay, so they use Instagram a lot for their sport. And the way that they were doing it is through hashtags for certain moves. So like if there was a certain trick that they wanted to show off, they would record it, and then they would put a hashtag PD for pole dance and then the name of the trick. And people in the community were using that as like an encyclopedia of their moves. It was a really great resource. What Instagram started doing is shadow banning these hashtags. So
Isn't Instagram, who's Instagram owned by? Isn't it
Instagram's
Facebook?
owned by Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Instagram was shadow banning this hashtag. So what a shadow ban is basically, someone could make a post and it looks like it's fine, but it actually isn't getting, if you look up the hashtag, you're not going to see that post.
Okay.
So it's not getting promoted.
I'm not really up to date on all the social media terms and things like that,
But this is a kind of way that Instagram or that Facebook, because that's their parent company, controls speech, is through like shadow banning, and you don't see it on a user end. But if you're going to look up a certain hashtag that they have shadow banned, now your post isn't going to show up for people.
Yeah.
It's not going to show up in people's feeds. So I think that while Facebook may have, it's all good. While Facebook may have ideally wanted to keep free speech and have that as their motivation, they are limiting speech in a lot of ways, and they have a lot of control over limiting information that they don't want people to see.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they're limiting the speech they want to limit because, let's face it, Americans are very, very prissy when it comes to sex, and they want to hide that sort of thing, right? But it's like, I'll give you this. I think the fact that they are banning those sorts of things against little people who won't be able to do anything about it, but would not ban until really, really pressured anything posted by the president because it's political, or politicians or what have you. I mean, it goes to show that they've got pretty thin skin. I don't think sounds like they won't, they'll bowl over easily for people who have money or power, but they won't do anything for the little people. That's frustrating. Right?
It is frustrating. And again, I don't think that Facebook is responsible for everything that is happening, but I think that our social media landscape has certainly contributed to it.
Sure.
And has contributed to people kind of finding these finding like-minded groups, or finding they say, oh, maybe vaccines cause autism, and then they find a group that has 1,000 people on it on Facebook that also think that vaccines cause autism, and then the misinformation gets spread, and it gets spread, and it gets spread, and then the amount of people that are on there makes it legitimized, and Facebook does literally zero to combat misinformation.
And I think another problem I've noticed is when they do, put their warnings up or what have you, like they don't make you read the stuff like Twitter does. Twitter's working on something that's going to make you read the correct information before viewing, sharing, doing anything with any of those posts. And I think that's important because, right, the real problem at the center of it here is education, right? Like on different subjects. Like if you're educated and you want to make a certain decision based on that education, I'm okay with that, even though I disagree with it. For example, I know I'm probably going to get cancer, but I'm still making that decision, right? I'm making that informed decision as an adult. And so nobody can come and tell me, well, you're, whatever, you're just not uneducated. I know what I'm doing to myself, and I'll be the first one to tell you, yeah, this is terrible for me, right? And I'm still making that decision as an adult. And I think that's the difference. Is I think we have a lot of people now who it's not educated decisions. They've been given whatever information is being pumped at them, and they don't have the story, right? And they're making decisions. And instead of stepping in and saying, no, you're just missing some of the information, make sure you have all of this information before you start making those decisions. I think that's leading to a lot of these conspiracy related issues. And then, of course, the obvious fact of people not wanting to actually try to do any research to debunk what they believe, which is something that I know I do on a pretty much daily basis.
Well, on top of that, I think it's a lot of people just don't know how to do research, and it's something that they don't teach in school
I agree.
that they
You're right.
should be. And I think this is the whole situation we're in goes to show that these skills do need to be taught in school. How a child
Been
should be
saying that for
researched,
years, man. We should be
right?
teaching the rules of logic. We should be teaching the rules of critical thinking, and we should be doing it at like kindergarten, first grade.
Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of stuff that we get taught in school that we don't need to be, and there's a heck of a lot of real life, real world app things that we should know that
Yep.
we just really don't get taught.
Yep.
In your opinion, do you think that the measures that Twitter and Facebook are taking to combat this stuff is too little, too late?
I mean, it's kind of hard to answer that question any other way than yes, right? Because we're in the situation that we are.
Mm-hmm.
We would, if the question was, if the answer was no, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah. Then I guess it goes to, then what more can they do at this point to combat it? Like there's
It's
such a
really
large
hard to say.
there's such a large amount of people that have already they're just in this, they're like QAnon stuff. There's so many people that are just in it. There are people.
QAnon needs to go. They need to figure out who that is. And you know they can. And you also know that this administration is not interested in it, in
So
figuring that out.
I don't know if you've seen this, and I don't know if it's true. We can do some fact checking on this.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that that Q is the founder of 8chan, and that it's a
That would not
4chan image
surprise me
board clone.
in the least. Yeah, for those of you who don't know what 8chan is, let's talk about the scummiest place on the internet, excluding the dark web. It's basically dark web, but not on the dark web. It's
Dark web light.
gross.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Q, and it doesn't surprise me. I mean, QAnon started on like 4chan, right?
Yeah.
And it was was it the B? Was it the B one
Yeah. Random
that
board.
went nuts board, and then that got banned because there was child pornography, because there was spreading of conspiracy theories, and these are all people who work together, by the way, for us child pornography haters, which should be all of us guys. The people who got started on QAnon were in the same groups that were sharing child pornography. So let's get some shit right here. We are not looking at sources that are credible from the get-go. These are seedy people with seedy points of view, doing seedy things in little backwoods sides of the internet. And then they all moved to 8chan, and they continued doing it on 8chan, just filled with hate, right? Like that what was it, that how many mass shooters came out of those boards?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you've seen a lot of almost every story that you hear, if it's a teenage mass shooter, were they posting on 4chan or 8chan?
Yeah.
Probably. Like
And then of course 8chan got banned, and now it's basically just like Facebook groups, man, and it's really a problem. It's a big problem.
part of it is people want to feel like they're in on something. And, if I were to tell you, like, hey, no one else knows about this, but I have some really great secret information to share with you. And you can share it with 2 other people. And like, we created the secret cabal of like information. people do want to be in on something and think
Yeah,
that
but
they're,
the difference is really key, because if you said that to me, you know what my reaction would be.
yeah.
My reaction would be pure skepticism until you give me shit that's solid, right? If you come to me and you say, I have the secret about these people, and that doesn't add up with what I know about those people, I'm going to be like, I don't know, man. I mean, look, if I see something that backs that up, I'll consider it more, but that doesn't make any sense based on what I know.
That's true. And I think I wish more people did think like that. But I think part of it is also playing on emotions and fears that people have. So like
Right.
you first start with, you find a legitimate maybe sex
Quasi
trafficking ring,
legitimate.
you know?
Yeah, it would like also like QAnon is really like God and Jesus stuff.
I mean, on top of that, people are just going to
I'm an
listen.
atheist, folks. Sorry if you didn't know. I apologize. That was probably a little harsh. I'm sorry.
But if they'll that's how they work, is they play on either fears, or they play on someone's religion, or they play on something that's going to get them emotionally invested, and then they play on a hate. So like, oh,
Right.
did you know everyone in Hollywood is a child
Classic
molester?
psychological
Yeah.
control techniques. I mean, this is how abusers keep the abused around, is things like that. This is how and I know you guys hate hearing this, but this is how the Nazis came to power. This is what they did. They weren't always the Nazis that we know and think of. At one time, they were just a political party in Germany. And they used this sort of fear mongering to work their way into the position that eventually became, the awful, terrible thing that we all know about.
And then it gets to the point where they have the big lie, and this is
Right.
another tactic that Hitler himself would tout,
Sure.
is a lie that's so audacious that how could anyone say that if it wasn't completely true?
Right. But the problem is most of these people don't stop to think maybe this person is trying to control me for some ulterior motive, which is really goofy to me because ever since I was a little kid, I was suspicious of people saying things like that. You know, if someone came up to you as a little kid and was like, I have tons of candy for you, your response is to go, no thanks, man, and walk away.
It is, unless someone first gives you one piece of candy and then they give you, oh, here's a couple pieces of candy, and then another guy comes, here's three pieces. It's death by 1,000 cuts
But like
instead of
at some point, like in the 15th cut, you gotta wake up and be like, dude, what are you doing? Because it's not like there haven't been wake up moments. Lots of these things have been debunked. And the fact, by the way, the mere fact that a lot of these things that they bring up tend to disappear, while the things that people have brought up about QAnon and about President Trump and what he's done have stuck around and have gone further and have been investigated. I mean, that in and of itself should tell you something, right? They were interviewing Hillary Clinton in Benghazi for how long, and they didn't find anything. And by the way, we can talk about that another time, because I've been in situations like Benghazi in real life. I was in them, and I have quite a few things to say about that myself, because most people have never been in a situation like that. They will never be in a situation like that. And yet they want to assume that they know how that's going to go down. And it's not. I'm sorry. You don't know what you're talking about. And I hate to come on strong like that, but everybody, Dunning-Kruger has swept this nation by storm. And everybody thinks they know everything there is to know. And they don't, guys. You don't. Like this much, and you think you know the whole story. And it's really bothering me and a lot of other people who people who are more expert than I am on a lot of these topics, because they know the details, they go into the details, they do this their whole lives, and they know you're wrong. And it's not because they kind of know you're wrong, it's because they have information that you are not aware of, because you don't do what they do, and you don't realize that you don't have that information.
My saying is, the more you know you don't know.
Exactly.
And I think, when you do find that person who knows literally everything about everything, it's like, well, maybe you don't. Like,
I think it would be really, really smart if you wanted to pull up the definition of the Dunning-Kruger effect and just read it for folks listening, because I think this is something a lot of people should be aware of and check themselves on it, because you really need to be aware of when you don't know what you're talking about.
yeah, so the Dunning-Kruger effect, and this is just the dictionary definition,
Sure.
is it's a cognitive bias in which people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability, and it's related to the cognitive bias of illusory superiority, and comes from
Mm-hmm.
the inability of people to recognize their lack of ability.
And guys, like, it's okay to say you don't know something. No one's going to judge you. In fact, with me, you get a lot more respect, because I'll tell you what, if you tell me you know something and I'm talking to you about it and it's something that I know about, I can tell that you don't know what you're talking about. And other people who know what they're talking about can tell that you don't know what you're talking about. And if you've heard somebody or multiple people on several occasions, say in a Facebook argument or something like that, all come in and give these long descriptions about things, and you just go, too long, didn't read, and they're like, dude, you just don't know what you're talking about. It's not because they're all sheep. It's because you don't fucking know what you're talking about.
Exactly. One last thing that I want to talk about, and I think we'll wrap it up with this.
All right.
Have you been hearing about the Bob Woodward tapes this week?
I mean, how could I not?
Okay. So
wowza. And among other things, I mean, the whistleblower on the which one, right? The whistleblower on oh, come on, which one is this? There was one just a couple days ago, and for some reason it's escaping me. Help me out here, Malcolm.
There's so many that I'm not sure which one.
There was one it was the day after the Woodward tapes.
I did hear it was somebody who had resigned, correct? They had resigned their position after
It was the former
whistleblowing.
DHS, right? And they told them to come and downplay the severity of white supremacy in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was.
That was a big thing to come out this week.
But I think that's something we should save for next time, because that's a whole thing. The Russia thing is a whole thing, because I know I've gone several different ways on that, right? Like at one point I was like, oh, there must be something going on here. And then they did the investigation and there really wasn't much there. And I was like, well, I guess maybe the Russia thing isn't as big as we thought it was. But now this is coming out, and some of the other things have been coming out about interference, and it's just making me suspicious again, right? I'm not jumping to any conclusions, but it's making me suspicious again.
I think Russia's definitely something that we could spend a whole lot of time on, but
especially because I lived there for 4 years.
I want to talk specifically about the Woodward tapes.
Yeah, let's talk about
specifically. And if you haven't heard it, you can go ahead and hear this in the president's voice of him literally saying,
yeah,
it's worse than the flu. It's spread in the air. It's more deadly than I thought. And I'm downplaying it actively so that people don't panic.
And he told that's a shit excuse, bro.
He told this to Bob Woodward. First of all, if you don't know who Bob Woodward is, he is one of the most legitimate, legendary journalists in American history.
He did something very important in our history.
Broke the Watergate scandal in the Washington Post. The sheer fact that he did 18 interviews with Bob Woodward is mind-blowing to me.
Well, I
kind of
think Woodward is one of the people that he actually, has some respect for, which is kind of, there's not many. But I think from what I've heard inside the camp, from what I've heard from aides and things, that's someone that he actually had respect for, and that's why he did that, against the wishes of many people in the White House, who did not want him to do it.
He's one of the few journalists that is like, when it comes to their reputation, is an unimpeachable voice.
Absolutely.
So it is tough for anyone to say, "Oh, I don't trust him," but it's happening right now, and you
Oh
have
well,
it on
yeah,
tape.
but man, we can't. It's only happening because he released that, right? Like, if you had said that 2 days before that came out, everyone would have been like, "Oh, Bob Woodward's great. We love Bob Woodward," right? But
Mm-hmm.
now that came out, suddenly, oh, he's terrible. He's not great. Which, I mean, like, come on, guys. Like, let's look at the behavior here, people. Can we just stop for a second and look at the behavioral patterns? I know this isn't evidence, right? I know this isn't evidence. I understand that. But it's very circumstantial. And the way that the president has reacted to a lot of things like this, I think is telling, right? It's not, again, I want to make it clear, I am not considering this evidence, because it's not court admissible. The behavior of somebody is not something you can admit in court. It doesn't count in science, but does count in psychology. And psychologically, his behavior is of somebody, I would say, who looks pretty guilty, who's gotten caught and is trying to shed the blame. Now, that's a very personal opinion. I want to make that clear. That is not factually based, right? But shit, we've got a lot of circumstantial evidence there, man. Like, who what person starts blaming the person who revealed information about them if that information is real, right? Who's blaming the messenger?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind
Especially
of,
when it's your own voice on the tape.
for me, that's when it comes to the big lie. It's
Yeah.
like, that's the big lie. It's like, is this, first of all, it was being downplayed for months. Is it because it's panic? I don't know. I mean, this to me,
You'd
and
think the panic part would have ended when we shut down half the country. You would have
not,
stopped worrying about causing a panic when the panic had already passed.
well, not only that, but I mean, just in terms of his rhetoric, always, he likes to incite fear and panic in people because that gets people riled up. So, like, how many times have,
I mean, I think I gotta say, I want to stop you there, because I think that's a bit of a big leap, right? It's different from saying that he's incompetent, not very good at his job, is trying to save his own skin, right?
mm-hmm.
Versus he's actively trying to cause trouble just to cause trouble and get people hurt.
I don't think he's causing trouble to get people hurt. I think he's causing trouble to get
Cool. I
people
wanted to
on his
make that
side.
distinction, because I
Yeah.
want to make sure people don't think that, we're saying anything like that, because we're not. Look, as much as we don't like Donald Trump, it's far sight to say, excuse me, it's a far sight to say that the man wants to kill people. That's not something that that's not something you just toss out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's not what I'm saying is there's a number of ways to appeal to somebody's emotion,
Right.
to appeal to people's emotions. And he's very, very good at doing that. And
He
I
is.
think the way that he does appeal to people's emotion is through fear a lot of the time.
I
It's
agree.
through fear of Antifa, or fear of the radical left, or fear of immigrants,
Right.
or or fear of Muslims, or fear of
Yeah.
Black people. There's a
Yeah.
whole
Well, fear traditionally is one of the easiest ways of getting the uneducated masses to follow. And I'm sorry, that was very blunt, But if we're going to talk about this, we really need to talk about this. And if folks are just going to believe all of this fear mongering, it is a lack of education on the topics, not overall education, right? I'm not saying you're stupid and uneducated. What I'm saying is you may be uneducated on the things that they're talking about. And somebody like Donald Trump, he's going to use that to push you towards his agenda, because he knows that you won't take the time to research what he's saying, to try and fact check what he's saying. He knows you're just going to take his word for it. And that's predatory, man.
Well, and the thing is, a lot of politicians, pretty much anyone, is going to use skills to appeal to your emotions. Even a salesperson's going to do that. You know,
Right.
if you go into a store. But
I
it's
think
just
there's
a
a way
matter
to do it.
of the strategy that you do it. And for me, what
Exactly.
I've seen,
Like, for example, Pete Buttigieg, I think, did it in a really, really good way.
yes, he's a very good speaker, and he's very good at to me, at explaining things in a way that you're like, you know what, this guy makes a lot of sense. I personally disagree a lot of things with him, but
Sure.
when I heard him speak,
He's a little more
it was,
centrist, I think, than
and
somebody
there's,
like a.
his thing is he's very sincere about a lot of things. But I think, again,
Right.
it's different strategies that you're using to appeal to people's emotions.
Right.
Trump, to me, uses fear a lot to appeal to people's emotions. So when I hear him saying, I didn't want to cause a panic, to me, that's going against a lot of the rhetoric that he has used throughout his presidency. It's like, you didn't want to cause panic, you didn't want to cause fear, but you bring up things that cause people to be fearful all the time. So to me,
I
I
think
don't
that's
see
a
the
good point.
logic.
I think that's a good point. I don't know if I necessarily, I don't know. You know, it's very hard for me to take the leap and kind of, unless it's like concrete and obvious, it's hard for me to take the leap and place intentions on somebody, right? Was he really trying to prevent a panic? Was he really, was he trying to stoke the fires at the same time? Was that his goal? I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually wanted to try to prevent a panic. That wouldn't. I wouldn't be surprised if that was his, initial motivation behind playing things down, right? But then when we got to a certain point, I think it became political.
Do you not think that in playing down how serious the virus is, while simultaneously playing up that it's a hoax or it was created by the Chinese or
Sure.
whatever,
That
do you
was
think?
all. That was all. I mean, let's remember, this interview was in February, in the beginning of February, right? That all happened with all of the crazy things and stuff that he said that are just nonsense. That all happened later, like, May, April, around that time, maybe March, right? So this was after he had that discussion. So a lot happens in that time, especially in this world, and it escalated, right? It became political because the left was like, no, we don't believe any of what you're saying. And as soon as the left said, we don't believe what you're saying, it became a political thing.
Do you not think, though, that the actions he took after the interview, undermine what he said in the interview?
I mean, like, which ones are you specifically thinking of? Just the things he said?
Yeah, I mean, there's been so much confusion, obviously, and even when I would watch the daily press briefings that were going on at the beginning of the pandemic and
Mm-hmm.
see how, Dr. Fauci might say one thing and then Trump might say another thing, and then the head of the CDC is going to say another thing, and there was so much contradictory information at the same time, um, you know, berating like people who wear masks, or berating governors for taking
Yeah,
certain
but the
actions.
berating the mask thing only happened once mandatory mask laws started coming into effect, and that was later. So that wasn't really during that time, right? Here's what I saw during that time is there's a lot of conflicting information because there was a lot of conflicting information coming in. It's early in the pandemic. We really don't know much, right?
And we still
We're
don't.
still learning. And we still don't. We're still learning a lot, but we know a sight more than we did back then.
Yeah.
And so in like February, in March, it's kind of hard to say if it was intentional or not, because again, we were learning as we were going. Now, once they started diverging, him and Fauci, like really publicly, and he started coming after Fauci, that was when I was like, no, this is now a political thing, right? At that point, this is political. But before that, you know, with like the China travel ban, which was, I'll give it to him, that was a great move. He should have done that. Maybe it should have been a little tighter, should have banned Americans from coming home. He should have kept them in quarantine. But I will give him that. He did the China ban, and that was a good decision. A lot of fucking good it's doing us right now, but he did do the right thing with that travel ban, and that was at the end of January, and since then, you know, information started coming in, and he's trying to stop a panic, saying it's gonna be okay. I think what was it? It was like in April when he said like it's gonna go away. That's actually later. We had 15 cases, something low in you know, in the early months in like February.
Yeah,
And
and
at
one
that
day
time he
it's
was
all
like,
gonna
we're going to
disappear.
control
Yeah.
this. Yeah, because it's just 15 people. Now, do I think he was outright lying? Not necessarily. I think we are looking at a situation of Dunning-Kruger effect. I think we're looking at a situation of somebody not really knowing what they're talking about, seeing the number 15, and going, well, you know, 15, that's fine. This is an overreaction at that point in the game. But as it went on, as it spread, as we learned more, and he kept sticking with that, that's when I say, as I said before, that's when it became, I think, a political thing.
Isn't that also a scary thing to say, you know, it's a situation of the Dunning-Kruger effect? That's fine if it's your crazy uncle on Facebook, but when it's the leader of the free world,
Yeah.
like,
I don't have anything to say. Yeah, of course. That's ridiculous. I mean, of course.
So
the president shouldn't be subject to any sort of cognitive bias, but they are, because they're political tools, right?
I mean, everyone's also human. The president's a human being.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
but
true.
at the
But if
same
we
time,
had like, for example, a physicist as the president of the United States, let me tell you who's not going to succumb to the Dunning-Kruger effect.
yeah, no, I agree. I also agree that there are plenty of Republican politicians, if they had been in the same situation, that would have
That
done
wouldn't
things
have
very
done that.
differently.
No,
Oh, yeah.
let me put this out there, because I want to make this clear. I am people would consider me very far to the left. If you can't tell by what I'm saying, I know I play devil's advocate a lot. I know I try to be, you know, I'm very much not the stereotypical far left person, right? I try to be a lot more understanding. I try to listen. I try not to be reactionary. But there are a few Republicans, past and present, that I have a lot of respect for. And I continue to have a lot of respect for them. John McCain was one of them. 2008 got a little shaky, but that's, you know, because we found out afterwards that it was these, you know, this kind of pre-alt-right Tea Party that we had that were doing things to really push things to the far right in ways that we now know he was not actually comfortable with. And we see the moments that he had where he stepped up and he told other people to stop doing that. I remember distinctly, I think everybody remembers this clip of that one lady who was like, Obama's a Muslim, Obama's a Muslim. And he was like, no, he's a good family man who he wants to help this country, and we just have disagreements on how to do it. That moment right there was sort of the exemplification of where I think we need to go back to. That is what we need to do. There's where politicians should be. But we're not going to get there with somebody like Trump, who likes to stoke the fires, right? Who likes to blame everybody but himself. He won't take any sort of And that's really what it comes down to, right? It's his narcissism. That's why he blames everybody but himself. It's not for any other reason but that, because he wants to keep this illusion to himself that he's this perfect guy who never makes any mistakes. Um, but also, like, we need to be telling the people that. And when McCain stood up and he did that, and every time I go back and I watch it, I go, man, I miss that. I miss him. I wish we had people like him on the right. Trump's not going to do that. McConnell is not going to do that. I'm sorry. And for that matter, Nancy Pelosi isn't going to do that. Okay? We need to look at our own party, too. Why the fuck did she go to a salon?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about it.
That was dumb for a lot of reasons. That was dumb because she's putting herself at risk. That was dumb because she's been saying don't go to salons. Nancy, get your shit together.
Hypocrisy is a whole another conversation that we can have, I think. And that's
There's
one of
levels. I think there's levels of hypocrisy. You can't be human without being somewhat of a hypocrite. You just can't.
True. But it's when you get into those higher levels of blatant hypocrisy.
When it's like just like when it's like everybody in the room just groans.
Yeah.
You're like, maybe you should pull it back a little bit. And I think, I think we've spent a lot of time talking about Republicans today, and I would really love to talk about Democrats next time, because I have a lot of bones to pick with the Democrats, and just how obtuse I think that they've been dealing with a lot of these things, right? There's a lot of things they could have done differently. There's a lot of things they should have been smart enough to see. And if we can see them, why can't they? Type of thing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just, I'm really frustrated because more than ever we see that, and once again, I found myself coming back to George Carlin, more than ever we see that, politicians are just put there to give us the illusion of choice, while more than half the country is completely ignoring the fact that these rich ass motherfuckers are up there lobbying, pumping money into politicians, and making the real decisions about what's going on here. And what do we do to combat that? We put one of them into the Oval Office.
Yep.
Unbelievable. Look, Hillary was trash. Terrible choice. Terrible choice. But when they talk about Hillary being corrupt, this is what I always said. I always made this analogy. I was like, look, Hillary's one side of the coin. You flip it over, Trump's on the other. He's the one, they're the ones pumping the money into the corrupt politicians like Hillary Clinton. So why on earth are you going to think that somebody like Donald Trump, who's known to be a sleazy businessman, by the way, it's not even like someone like Bill Gates, right, who has like a sterling record of business ethics, except in like the early years.
But he's trying to microchip all of us.
So. Oh, don't even get me started on that crap. You get me started on that crap, we're going to be here for another
That's next time, yeah.
That's next time. All right, fine. Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett's an easier example because they can't be like microchip man. Warren Buffett is a great example, right? Clean record, always clean, never did anything shady or anything like that. That's the guy you would want if you wanted the businessman to be president, right? Somebody like that. Or on the Republican side, somebody like, I don't know, not Elon Musk, for God's sake. Oh my God. I don't know who's a good, decent Republican businessman.
I think the fact that neither of us can think of one is a telling.
No, I think that's just a lack of research. It's got to be a lack of research.
I'm sure
I refuse to believe
somebody out there.
I refuse to believe there are no good Republican businessmen. That is preposterous. I mean, like, I personally know some, not famous ones, mind you, but like, come on.
We'll do some research and look up a famous one that we can mention.
But you guys, I mean, like, you understand what I'm trying to say. Is like, of all the businessmen outsiders that we could have picked to come in and do this job, this is the fucking putz that we come up with? Seriously?
Well, I think that somebody like Warren Buffett or really, really successful businessman.
Herman Cain. Herman Cain. I disagreed with a lot of his politics, but he was a decent person at heart.
I think, though, that a lot of very successful businessmen don't want to be president. That's not their goal.
That's fair.
And I think that, and we can get into a whole other conversation of reasons that Trump might have wanted to become president.
I honestly think it goes as far back to his childhood and the way his father treated him and how that kind of spiraled into this narcissism that, is kind of on full display for everybody to see. I mean, it seems like it's a factor of his relationship with his father, ultimately, when it comes down to it for me. And I gotta say, man, like, I have a level of empathy for the guy, right? Or maybe sympathy would probably be the better word.
Yeah, I think it's hard to be empathetic with him.
Yeah, it is.
Sympathetic,
but I always try to be empathetic, right? That's where I want to go to first before I go to sympathetic. But because I always want to relate, right? I want to try to put myself in other people's shoes. But I'm sympathetic. Part of me feels sorry for him, right? Because he had a shitty life in a sense, not money-wise, but family-wise.
Yeah.
He could never have a marriage that worked. He always put on this front of, I'm this guy, I'm going to be this dude. And I'm sure there's a different Donald Trump in there somewhere that nobody ever knew. We're never going to get to know, right? And I feel sorry for that guy. But that doesn't forgive the things that he's done.
Yeah, totally. But I think we'll start wrapping it up because there's a lot more that we can talk about there.
Like how you feel sorry, like you sympathize with Thanos, for example.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah. Mind you, he has not. Look, make all the analogies we want. Hitler, Thanos. He has not actively caused a genocide. Okay. Let's make that clear for all those people who can be like, he don't kill people, don't compare him to Thanos and Hitler. We know that.
Yeah.
We know. We are not saying that he killed all these people. We're not insinuating that at all. That's never our intention. And we don't think he's capable of that. We don't think he would do something like that. At least I don't. He would have to prove me wrong on that one.
We can hope.
Yeah, but
we haven't gotten into any new wars, so that's a plus, right?
That's true.
We almost did. We almost did at the beginning of this year. Did we get saved from the war by coronavirus? There's a question.
Wow.
Did we get saved from a war with Iran?
It's a really good question. Let's save that. Let's save that for next time. So next time we're going to be talking about that. Did we save ourselves, or not ourselves? Did coronavirus stop us from getting a war? And would the war have been less of a death toll?
Or more?
Or more. I think it probably would have been less.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been in Iraq for how long, and it's far less. A lot more than September 11th, but
yeah,
far less than coronavirus. And then we also wanted to talk about. We wanted to turn our sights on our own party and rip into them too, because they need it. They have it coming, man.
So I think they have it coming. What we're going to talk about next time. I hope if anyone ended up watching this whole thing, you were entertained. I know I welcome any comments. I welcome any criticisms about what we said.
And I think we should look into perhaps we can have a right-wing guest or two next time to come on.
Definitely. I want to have a variety of opinions.
Absolutely.
Especially when we talk about politicians we may agree more with. So
because I'm sitting here, listening to us, and I'm like, we are trying our best to be as centrist as possible. But even I'm kind of like, like,
it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. And we do want to, we want to make sure that everybody's views are represented. if I say something that's dickish, I want someone here who's going to call me out for being a dick, because I do that sometimes. And yeah, we don't want this to just be an echo chamber.
I think we'll have to also make some sort of email that people can email us at, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Well, and we're working on getting our YouTube channel going. This will be on YouTube.
Yeah.
Probably is right now at the time of you seeing it. So
exactly. So thanks for watching up to this point. Hopefully
once again, I'm
hopefully
Jordan.
you enjoyed. I'm Malcolm, and we'll see you guys later.